Good morning, everybody. I hope you're keeping well and surviving this crazy period of time we're going through. Talking of another crazy period of time, I've been asked, I think one of the questions I've been asked more than any other question in my entire life was, what was Woodstock like? So I guess it's the elephant in the room. I'm going to have to answer it. 1969, I was 25 years old, I guess. English guy living the dream. I'd always wanted to come to America. And here I was in the middle of it. It was the third tour of America, in actual fact. And in another video, I'll talk about those early tours too, because that always interests me, the aspect of someone in another country, like a pirate ship sailing into a port and meeting all these strange people, even though they speak the same language. So 1969, we were on a 10-week tour. We were 6 weeks into that 10-week tour. We'd played the Newport Jazz Festival, I think the Texas Blues Festival on that tour, and the night before Woodstock, we were actually on tour with some artists from the Newport Jazz, Dizzy Gillespie and Nina Simone, and that's another story which I'll tell. But anyway, 5 o'clock in the morning, we had to fly to LaGuardia, New York City, to do this festival, which was, by this time, into its third day. We knew nothing about the festival. We'd heard nothing about the festival. Little bits of things were coming up on the radio or TV at the time, but you've got to remember that the Vietnam War was happening. The man had landed on the moon, and I was traveling a lot, so I wasn't watching. I didn't know anything until we actually landed at LaGuardia at a ridiculously early hour in the morning. In fact, Alvin almost didn't come. When we had to leave the hotel in St. Louis at 5 a.m., he couldn't be raised, but I pushed his tickets under the door and said, "Alvin, I'll see you at the airport." And that got him up because he didn't want to be left to make his own way to the airport. So, one of those fortuitous things 10 years after made Woodstock. We knew nothing about it. Nobody knew what was going to happen. Nobody expected it. Those of you, obviously, have seen the movie, so you'll know what it was all about. And it's become, 51 years later, it's become a huge thing, a statement as to the period, the feeling of the time, really. and I felt slightly detached from it because I'm British, if you like, English. You couldn't, I couldn't be called up. So that didn't, although I was against the war, I was a bit, a peace freak, as you might say. Wasn't really a hippie. But I subscribed to peace and love and rock and roll. And I was having one hell of a time. We all were traveling across America, as I say. So we arrived at LaGuardia, and we were to drive up to as close to the festival as we could. Our American manager or tour manager said, it's chaos, it's going to take us hours. What we're going to do is we're going to go to the Holiday Inn Liberty, which is a few miles from the festival site, and go from there. So, those of you that don't know, I should say that the Woodstock Festival was moved 44 miles up the road to Bethel because the Woodstock authorities wouldn't grant them a license at the last minute. They revoked it. So the festival's at Bethel, 44 miles from Woodstock, or 42 miles. When we arrived at the Holiday Inn in Liberty, where we were supposed to have a day room, there was no room at the inn, so to speak. It was slammed. In the coffee shop, it was like a scene from Star Wars with Hendrix and members of The Who and Janis Joplin and Blood, Sweat and Tears. And I got it. I cannot tell you how many people were there. It would have been an autograph hunter's dream, but from my point of view, there was no food, no hotel room. So what I decided to do was, I now realised it was something unusual was going off, and I decided, along with I think Alvin and Chick, maybe Rick too, I'm not sure. We decided we'd go down to the gig, try and get something to eat. There was nothing to eat there, no hotel room at the hotel, so we took a helicopter. Now those helicopters, you've seen, you've heard about them. They reminded me so much of the helicopters that were being used in Vietnam. I suspect that they probably weren't, but they looked like that. with the open hatch, and as we were flying over the site, and the dispatcher, I guess he would be called, was leaning. He took my camera and he leaned out of the open bay and took a film of us going along. Maybe I can show it to you sometime. But we landed backstage, and it was pretty obviously chaos. Some of you have seen bits of it in the movie, but I was looking for food. That was my thing. I really wanted something to eat. I'd got up at 4 in the morning. I left the hotel. I hadn't eaten since the day before. I wanted something to eat. So I get backstage at the backstage area, and I decided that I'd look for something to eat. Well, as I'm about to do that, Pete Townsend from The Who came hurrying over to me. I've known Pete for ages. And he said, whatever you do, don't eat or drink anything because it's all been spiked with acid. And I made the mistake, and I had a terrible night, and blah, 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 blah. So, I'm left with a soda pop if the can's sealed. And that was it. So I was feeling pretty miserable. I must admit, the Walter, the Forrest Gump of rock and roll, if you like, that gets to play every major festival, was feeling pissed off at being at one of the major festivals in the world. But I was at the time. I think a lot of people were. We didn't know what was going to happen. So I kind of wandered around, and by this time I think I saw Janis Joplin wandering across with a bottle of champagne. She gave me a wave and she disappeared. I guess there was a catering area, but I never went to it. Joe Cocker came in. I remember I wanted to see Joe's set. I'd known Joe since the days when we were all playing in local bands in the Midlands. Joe comes from Sheffield, I come from Mansfield, Nottinghamshire, and we'd actually done a few gigs together in the pubs. Funny, isn't it? It's a small world. Anyway, I decided I'd watch Joe's set, and I think Country Joe was going to go on after us, and then we were going to go on. So I thought, well, Joe's set, 40 minutes, on we go. Well, as Joe was coming off, the clouds were gathering, and as Joe took off in a helicopter, the clouds really gathered, and it started to drip, and then it started to pour. And it was one hell of a downpour, a thunderstorm like I'd not witnessed before. To capture the thing on the movie, I think they used the soundtrack, the rain sequence from Gone with the Wind, just to add a little bit of atmosphere to it. But if you were there, you wouldn't need any atmosphere. It's poured down. And I spent, I guess, 4 or 5 hours in the back of a U-Haul truck at the side of the stage. The rain was coming down so much, it was turning everything into mud. I recall that they were worried the stage had slipped 6 or 7 inches down the hill, and there were platforms on the side of the stage where the VIPs, the managers, etc., the groupies, if you like to, could stand and watch the bands. Well, they had to dismantle those to take some weight off the stage, which they did, and then they were a little bit worried about the towers, and you may have seen in the movie, get away from the towers, watch out for the brown acid. So Pete was right. But anyway, I was stuck in the back of this U-Haul truck, feeling pretty miserable for myself as the rain poured down. Now, I don't know what happened to the other bands, the rest of the band. I've no idea. They'll all have their own tale. And whether it's true or not, I don't know. I suspect that Alvin went back to the Holiday Inn with Joe Cocker in the last helicopter that went out, because I didn't see him at all until the rain stopped. And we came down, and then Alvin appeared, and we thought we'd go on. Because you see, the managers by this time were all fighting to get the bands on stage. But just as we were about to go on, Country Joe rushed on. I must actually ask him when I see him if he remembers that. They rushed on and topped us to the stage. So we had another 45 minutes to wait, I guess. So by the time we hit the stage, it was getting dark. It was kind of 8 o'clock, I guess. We get on. Well, when we hit the stage, I was horrified. Because of the downpour of rain, there were cables running across the floor, and in between the cables there was water, just dripping water. And I remember Alvin saying, my God, if one of us gets electrocuted, we'll sell a lot of records. But somehow, that foolishness of youth, I didn't think, I thought, we'll be okay. health and safety nowadays, God, it would never have happened. But it did. And we went on. And that was the first time they'd used lights that day. So that was good. That was a bonus for us. And I could see the steam rising off the audience. It was like a shot from one of those Mad Max movies, you know, these little fires you could see going into the distance, and these people steaming away. And the band on stage was steaming away too. Because one of the problems is, when you get humidity, you get tuning problems. And we started the set, we were horribly out of tune. And I think you have to remember, in those days, there weren't guitar tuners, you know, the pedal tuners that some of you may have seen. The only way to tune up your guitar was with a tuning fork or with a keyboard. And that's always quite difficult on stage because of all the other noise that's going on. So we stopped. The first number, boom, okay, a little bit out of tune. Second number, which was Good Morning Little Schoolgirl, I think we stopped. Actually, I know we did because I've heard the tapes. I've been fortunate enough to hear the tapes 50 years later. We stopped the number 3 times to tune up. In the end, we carried on and played it out of tune. By the time we came to, and then we decided we'd do a drum solo. Or Rick would do a drum solo, to put it more reactive, to give us a chance to tune up. So that happened, but was still having tuning problems. I Can't Keep From Crying, we had tuning problems. Help Me, we had tuning problems. And then Alvin breaks a string. And at that point, he goes off stage to change his string. And he asked me to talk to the audience. You know, you can imagine, 500,000 people. Can you hear me at the back? How are you doing? You know, all those things. Anybody from Cleveland here? Many things. But I talked to the audience. And to be honest, they were fantastic. And that was the energy. You could feel the energy that was coming from that crowd. They'd been rained on. They'd been covered in mud. There was nothing to eat. I don't know what the percentage of toilets there were per 1,000 people, but if you got 500,000 people, there certainly wasn't 1,000 toilets. So you work it out. It was a hell of a mess. But we carried on, and I'm going home. That's the thing. That's the thing on the movie. The movie, as I said, that's what made it famous. And that was an encore. That was after Alvin had gone off stage. We finished the set, and Bill Graham, who was comparing, said, "Do you want more? Do you want more?" And the audience shouted for more, and we went back on. And we played "I'm Going Home." And Martin Scorsese filmed, did I think he was the director of the Woodstock thing, or cameraman. I can't remember what his official capacity was, but anyway, he did it. And you know, that one thing cracked America for 10 years after. And I should add it. We had 3 albums in the American charts by this time, and in actual fact, I think we were playing somewhere between 2,000 and 5,000 people a night. So we were fairly well known on what you call the underground scene, you know, the Fillmores and the venues like that. But what the Woodstock, or in reality, the movie did for us, it opened up every 10, 20,000, 30,000 capacity venue in a college town, in wherever you like, that you've never heard of, and we could sell it out. So it was wonderful. It was a blessing. I thought it was a great trip. Alvin didn't like it. Alvin thought that was the end of it. When we started playing, people couldn't hear us playing, and he didn't like that. But I must admit, I enjoyed the trip, and I think I was very, very lucky to have been there. So we do the set, and as I say, it wasn't a fantastic set from our point of view, although the crowd reaction was brilliant. And we decided we'd head back to New York, where we'd actually managed to get a hotel room. So although Alvin says at the end of the movie, "I'm going home by helicopter," he was in actual fact, he was either lying or deluded, because the helicopters had stopped running because it was dark.